Yeah, thank you very much, Stefan. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. I can't remember when I last went to a conference that was in such a beautiful location, had such a stimulating and professional program, and was as warmly welcoming as this, and I very much appreciate it. My background's in the schools. I started teaching as a primary teacher. I was a principal in Aboriginal schools out in the northwest of New South Wales, and then set out on a journey working in different places in the world, studying in America, worked for a couple of years in Singapore, and had been in Hong Kong for about 23 years. But while I've been there, I've worked right throughout East and Southeast Asia many, many times. And I think, as I hope, at least as I talk, you'll find why I have such a focus on ongoing renewal and ongoing learning, because frankly, if I hadn't been someone that had been forced and hadn't been able to keep learning in different ways, I wouldn't be here and I wouldn't be surviving where I am. Our basic goal as educational leaders, and that's all of us, is to leave our schools and our communities in a better place than when we started. It's that simple. A place that prepares our students and communities to live happily, morally and productively into their futures. We know, all of us, that we are only the temporary custodians of a school. But we've learned over recent times that we don't know with any certainty what the future will be, and we've seen that again and again in the conference. Our challenge, therefore, is to keep up personally and to shape a school that keeps pace with change, and with possible change, is to engage in learning or in constant renewal. But at the same time, we have to stay unshakably connected to our moral intent and our educative purpose. As Starrett tells us, he says the work of educational leadership should be work that is simultaneously intellectual and moral, an activity characterised by a blend of human, professional and civic concerns to a work of cultivating an environment for learning that is humanely fulfilling and socially responsible. Great words. Today, I want to suggest that successful leadership depends on ongoing personal leader renewal and then leaders leading organisational renewal, but while staying true to purpose. So what I'm going to try and do is follow this outline. Number one, I'll set the scene in which leaders lead today. And I'll do it fairly briefly because we've had a lot of it. Second, given this scene, I'll suggest that leadership is essentially a cognitive and a moral activity. And that leaders, and I don't just mean principals, need to be able to adapt, adjust and refresh their understandings, their insights, their skill sets, while staying absorbed, and I use that word on purpose, by the moral and educative purpose of schooling. The key leadership challenge then is a learning challenge, one that tests us in equal measure to evolve psychologically and emotionally to a more complex way of being while staying crystal clear on our purpose. Third, and it's a little bit yucky, but I'm going to use the metaphor of a snake shedding its skin to try and capture the nature of leadership renewal. And then finally, I'll postulate just a little bit on how shedding and refreshment might be nurtured within a school, how we do our jobs as leaders to get it around the school. Number one, our environment will continue to shift and to hybridise in ways that we can't really predict. This includes both our macro environment, as Euron was talking about, and our more immediate school communities. The last couple of decades has witnessed massive social, technological, informational and economic change, most of it previously unseen in terms of both its shape and its impact. Petrie describes the resultant environment, and you know this because you feel it, as volatile, uncertain, complex and ambiguous. 2, changes and challenges have streamed from this environment that he describes, if somewhat unevenly, into our schools, bringing both the positive but also bringing the ominous. For example, Changes in technology have given our students undreamed of access to research, information and knowledge, forcing many of our established knowledge repositories either into early retirement or to morph into something more relevant. In schools, increasingly sophisticated research that we do both locally and internationally has provided informed advice about which schools need more supports in our classrooms, differing teaching approaches to address these needs, and better monitoring tools to tell us, and unfortunately everybody else, whether we've done a good job or not. 3, it's highly likely, there's no doubt in fact, that these parcels of both welcome and unwelcome change will continue to arrive almost daily. And they'll come at different times, they'll excite us, they'll get us going, and other times they'll challenge. A key challenge for us as leaders then, as we prepare to adapt for change and challenge, is that we don't really know what it will look like. And Brown captures this. He says when he talks about leadership that the perfect storm of increased complexity, accelerating change and near constant uncertainty has created conditions that exceed the mental and emotional capacities of many, many leaders. Our laws, culture and social contracts continue to move in a linear fashion. 4. So while these uncontrollables are zipping around and pulling in different directions, if we strip it all away, our purpose is constant. It's to equip students with the ability to live and thrive in the future. Let's simplify this. We want students who are work ready, whether that be academically, whether it be vocationally, whether it be entrepreneurially. And we want them to be morally and ethically ready to live in, or not only live in, but to make the world a better place, even in their own small way. Unfortunately, again, as Ewan has pointed out, the nature and the busyness of the expectations around us recently, and certainly in some system, has pulled us towards privileging more easily quantifiable, more immediately visible academic outcomes. Or it's knelt us at the altar of technology, which can overshadow sometimes the moral importance of what we do. This has happened, it hasn't been planned. I don't believe it's a conspiracy, but it is a reality. So, the scene, if we pull that all together, the context of educational leadership looking ahead has 2 converging paths. So they're not parallel. The first is to constantly renew our mindsets and actions to be successful in a hybridising environment. And the second is to stay closely connected to our moral and educative purpose. These are the touchstones of trust. Leadership 5.0 then, I think, challenges us personally to change, but while staying the same. At the same time, it challenges us to weave a morally committed, renewing culture into the fabric of our schools. That's what we do as leaders. Renewer is the key. Now, to try and illustrate the notion of renewal, I'm going to use the metaphor of a snake shedding its skin. Do you have snakes in Switzerland and Germany? You do. Probably not as many big and nasty ones that we have in Australia. So let me tell you to start, and this is how I actually got onto this metaphor. My wife lives in Australia in a house by the beach, and there's lots and lots of snakes around it, eastern browns, unfortunately. So quite often our garden has snake skins left draping the trees in the garden. So let me tell you a little bit about them. Now, unlike humans, a snake's skin doesn't grow as it grows. Fairly regularly, depending on its age, a snake's skin reaches the point where it is too small for the snake's body. So they have to grow a new skin. To do this, they have to leave, of course, the old skin behind. They also need to exchange skins because in the course of their life, they get lots of nasty parasites and things attached to them, which makes them slow down and not as good at what they need to do. Now, when they're ready to shed an old layer, the skin just doesn't fall off. They need to create a rip in the old skin by rubbing it against a rock or a hard object or a log or something like that. And then they also need to find some water to go through to lubricate the skin coming off. Once the old skin has been breached, the snake inches its way through until the old layer is removed and generally left hanging on a tree. When a snake is about to shed, it's referred to as being in the blue. You can see that it needs to shed. Its skin becomes dull. Its eyes become cloudy or bluish, and there's a noticeable increase in nervous behaviour and aggression, which we sometimes feel. Snakes shed their skins as long as they're growing, And snakes grow all their lives, so they never stop shedding. Now, the frequency will change. Younger snakes shed more often than older snakes, but they all keep shedding. Now, after they finish shedding, it's great. The eyesight is sharp again. Its parasite clear. All those parasites have come off. Its colour and its sheen are more vibrant. It's renewed in all sorts of ways and ready to grow even more. But remember, and we'll come to this, it's only the skin which sheds, not the heart, not the purpose of being a snake. So let's try and apply this to school leader renewal. For us, shedding our skin is about uncovering new mindsets, new understandings, emotions, as well as behaviours, knowledge, ability and skills, and leaving behind those that are no longer relevant. So, shedding reflects evolutionary biology, an adaptive process of renewal that involves three basic tasks. 1, identifying the cultural DNA that should be conserved, the good things that we should keep. 2, identifying the cultural DNA that should be lost. And 3, innovating new capacity which better takes us forward to handle the new. Are you with me? Yeah. That's one person is. That's always a good sign. And thank you, Stefan. I noticed you moved, but that's okay, we'll do it. All right. What I'm going to say now, are there some lessons or some insights that we can gain for this by analysing this for leaders? And I've come up with a number of these that we might think about. Number 1, shedding is intentional. Snakes intentionally shed their skins. It just doesn't happen. They just don't wake up one morning and the skin's gone. They need to shed. Leaders for the future understand that their present capabilities and mindsets may be inadequate to solve the learning and organisational problems that they will continue to face. They know that they must consciously seek new knowledge and understanding, be it pedagogical, be it cultural, be it technological. And if they don't, their ability to lead successfully will certainly fade. Intentional renewal for us involves things such as focused reflection, seeking feedback actively, knowledge mining in and outside our schools, and questioning the present practices that we have. Second, shedding is adaptation. Snakes shed their skins because they have literally outgrown them. They're too tight. If they don't shed, they can't grow. The process is therefore about adapting to new needs. So as conditions change, much of what we know, believe and do in our schools can become less potent. It no longer fits the demands of the jobs or the needs of the students. We've outgrown it. If we don't leave behind some of this, there is less room for new learning, insights and approaches. This is about learning to adapt to new demands and situations through renewing how we conceive, conceptualise and practice our leadership within our schools. Now, this calls for different approaches to learning and development than we might be used to. So this has messages for us personally and for the people who provide our learning. Sala Cruz suggests that many leader development opportunities rely on horizontal learning rather than vertical learning. Now, horizontal learning is technical competency-based learning, and whereas this is useful, it's mainly effective when problems are clearly defined and techniques for solving them are known. This is no longer the case. Renewal may call for vertical development, which focuses on advancement in a leader's thinking capability. The outcome of vertical development is the ability to think in more complex, systematic, strategic, and importantly, interdependent ways. Salcrew explains it this way. He says, horizontal learning is like pouring water into an empty glass. The vessel fills up with new content, water, wine, at this place, I imagine, and then it spills over. Vertical development aims to expand the glass itself. Not only does the glass have increased content, but the structure of the vessel, our minds, is bigger. This is about, again, mental and emotional renewal to nurture our capacity to adapt. 3, shedding is timely. Snakes know when they need to shed. So does anyone who sees them. Don't get too close. When they're about to shed, it's referred to as being in the blue. And again, the skin becomes dull, the eyes become cloudy and bluish, and there's a noticeable increase in nervous behaviour and aggression. Think about yourself in your job. Ever had that feeling of being overwhelmed? Yeah? I have. Stressed. There's just too much flowing in for you to manage. In fact, some days you find yourself when you turn up to work in your pyjamas because you've just lost point of it. Or perhaps that you believe that you always have the right answer to something. Or conversely, you find out that you never have a solution. Perhaps the students don't appear to be as engaged as they could be. The teachers won't experiment in the classroom, or you just don't get it. And that happens to me. Any of these can signal that it's time to refresh, to rethink things, to learn new ways, to look for alternatives and to adapt. Sometimes we recognise these signs ourselves, but more often, when we need to shed, we need others to help us see. That's the point of renewal. Shedding is regular. As I said, a snake will continue to shed its skin as long as it's growing, and they always grow. They grow through their whole lives, even though the frequency might change. Developmental psychologists tell us that adults continue to progress at varying rates through roughly predictable stages of mental development. At each higher level of development, adults make sense of the world in more complex, in more exclusive ways. In other words, their minds grow bigger. In today's environment, leader renewal can't be a one-off thing. And as I said at the beginning, as I moved to new places, if I didn't relearn, if I didn't shed, if I didn't renew, I just don't think I would have been able to do the job. So we've got to do it again and again if we are to confront the adaptive challenges that we're facing. So renewal is not just timely, it's also regular. Next, shedding is contextual, and we've heard that in almost every talk, and it's great. When snakes are ready to shed the old layer, they put a rip in the skin, they rub against a rock, they find some water, and they try and get that to help rip it off. So adaptive learning works with the context within which we work, and our renewal as leaders can only make sense when applied in our context. Learning does not happen in a vacuum. It's not blind, for example, to culture, to socioeconomic status, teacher beliefs, or the special needs of our communities. Opening new mindsets cannot be done by sitting in a chair. We need the people and the systems around to rub against, not personally, but professionally, to rub against, spark our learning, and lubricate the process through support, challenge, and care. Shedding is cleansing. As I said, when snakes move around, they get little ticks and other parasites that attach to their skins and underneath, and this stops their body, like it does with us, functioning so well. When we stay in a job, we naturally form both personal and organisational habits. I certainly know that I do, habits that we do. Sometimes, whereas we developed these in our jobs for very good reasons, they endure, well, just because they're there. These are our parasites. For leaders, our parasites might be outdated ways, outdated pedagogies, mindsets, beliefs about the culture and the cultural makeups of our school, and it needs to be cleansed. Again, vertical learning may help towards renewal and cleansing those parasites. In fact, Maguire and Rhodes talk about vertical learning as being a 3-stage cleansing process. Number 1, the first stage is awaken. You become aware that there is a different way of making sense of the world and doing things in new and different ways. The next stage is to unlearn and discern. Old assumptions are analysed and new assumptions and possibilities tested at work. Discerning is incredibly important. Sometimes we try to do too many things, too many changes, and this adds to the problem of uncertainty, and it can't be good in school if we just keep putting more things on the stack and not taking anything out. Finally, advance comes after practice, when new ideas get stronger and overtake previous assumptions and ways. The new ways start to make more sense than the old. It's a cyclical, ongoing process that helps remove some of the parasites which can hinder our learning growth, how we do things in our schools. Bad news. Snakes have to shed their skin, and when they leave it but this can be painful. This can hurt. Shedding, moving to new mindsets, learning and unlearning to make sense of new situations can be really painful. There will always be an almost natural resistance to change. We resist for different reasons, including fear of leaving what we know, of being left professionally or personally vulnerable. This is understandable, it's uncomfortable. Renewal can be a painful process, but we push through it because we know the why of us being a leader. We know the why is so important. Finally, shedding is rejuvenating, and we all like to get rejuvenated. After shedding, the snake can see better, it's got no little parasites on it, it even looks better, its colour and its sheen. It's renewed in all sorts of ways and ready to grow even more. When we refresh and discover new ways, new mindsets, we can see more clearly and look for more creative ways to meet our student needs. Once we shed and parade our new skin, new learning, we find we can see better. We find we can see deeper. We've got rid of those distractive parasites, and we even look better. People notice it when we come to school. We look better, more colourful, more vibrant, ready for our next stage of growth and to make our leadership more meaningful for today. However, let's clarify. The skin is the mindsets, the habits, the beliefs, the learning approaches, how we communicate in our schools, etc. It's ingrained perhaps from a different age. The snake shedding process refreshes how we see and think about our work, so it helps our brains work better. But snakes do not shed their core. They're still a snake. They don't shed their heart, their guts, or their purpose. In fact, from shedding the skin, these work better and remain largely intact. So as we intentionally learn different things in different ways, at the same time, we fiercely defend our core values: equity, fairness, care, social justice, for example, and our purpose as leaders. Better outcomes for students and a better school than it was when we first went in. So, I'll summarise. Through the snake shedding metaphor, I've suggested that to lead successfully now and into a complicated future, we've got to be adaptive learners who stay intimately connected to our moral and purposive core. That is, face the challenges through renewal, but while keeping our eye on the prize, adapting to and shaping the future based on purpose, but not being unthinkingly hijacked by the unnecessarily new, the technological cool, or just following a central blueprint and quantitative targets. Now, however, there is a serious flaw in the snake metaphor. What is it? Snakes are individual creatures. They don't have leaders, groups or tribes. Thank God. We don't want them becoming collective, I don't think. They're just not collective animals. They don't help each other. We're not like that. Our job is to lead worthwhile change through positively influencing others around us, through creating a culture where everyone sees the need to learn, to shed and renew. I guess to try and build a form of collective shedding. So in this very final part, have I got a few more minutes? And it's very... Hang on, what time did I start? So, in this final part, I'll discuss... I'll be quick. Some very basic interrelated conditions that leaders might champion to spread the benefits and process throughout the school. Because this is what leadership is. It's not just doing it for ourselves, it's beyond. But I'll go through them relatively quickly. There's 5 of them. The first one is prospecting. In organisations, prospecting implies looking for something valuable, something important, even if you only have a rough idea of where to look or what you'll find. To do this, leaders weave a set of values through emancipatory structures in their communities, and these encourage people to look for worthwhile learning in promising locations. Prospecting requires agility and adaptability along the way through challenging mental structures. Rarely do prospectors find usable wealth easily. Prospectors find it based on a belief that there's something out there and that there's something valuable out there. As such, like shedding our skins, prospecting involves a process which values collective perseverance, questioning, listening, freshness of our minds, curiosity and improvisation, all agitating in concert with a widely shared moral and educative purpose. I'll skip this one for you, Stefan, even though it was a good one. Next one, paving and bridging. Organisations that shed to renew retain a firm moral and educative core, and this roughly frames learning. Leaders refine and define the purpose collaboratively and apply its essence to pave the school's path to new learning and ongoing success. Now, the paving in the school is always winding. It's never a straight line. It's not about telling students what they should think or what it's right to think. To the contrary, it's about space for them to work out for themselves what's right. So the path, therefore, to encourage adaptive learning, to face volatility, it's got to be wide enough to allow people to be themselves and to discover on their own, but it needs to be clear enough that there is another destination. When you build the path, you also have to build the bridges necessary to link different understandings. The past and the present, the practical and the theoretical in schools today, and big parts of that in all our communities is how we bridge generations and how we bridge cultures. And this, I think, is going to be one of the absolute keys to whether our schools work. The path is bridged and paved with values, structures and relational networks which foster adaptive learning and creativity, all the things needed for regular review. Shedding collectively is about weaving the talent that we have, and this is about moving out of our traditional boxes. If we want to be more creative, we have to engage collections of people from a range of backgrounds. This means people from different discipline backgrounds. So mathematicians have to talk to the philosophers, which is not always hard to do. Different cultural backgrounds, teaching levels, ages, work, community roles, and so on. The school is a place that refreshes through different ideas agitating collectively. And we're more likely to find answers to those wicked problems, I think, those ever-shifting problems that we've been talking about, if we get people to move and cross their traditional boundaries and feed off each other's ideas. Your job, our job as leaders, is to mobilise, group, ungroup the diverse talents across and beyond our communities to constantly refresh learning. Collective shedding, collective learning, collective values. Shedding there involves leading, pulling together disparate cultural values and related cultural tension, and in the process getting the shared and constant renewal. That's the shedding process. 3 faces to trust. 1, we know from research again and again that in an organisation where the leader is trusted and trusts, that people prefer to work there, that there are better outcomes for the students, that teachers work better. So that's the first case of trust. The second trust is what Carl Weck calls simultaneous trust and mistrust. He says, first, while much of the research and new knowledge gushing into our schools is great, there's also plenty of fake information, or research that's so decontextualised that it holds little applicability beyond its home ground. And we had someone warning us yesterday about trying to copy Shanghai. Don't do it. It might work there. It won't work for us in other places. So, while we view things which land on our screens, a certain lack of trust is sensible. In essence, this means we stay open, and anything wanting a place in our school should be contemplated carefully through an intellectual lens and through the lens of perfect and ethics. Second, trust and mistrust. Weck tells us that professionals who survive, and it's a great study if you haven't read it, are those who manage to simultaneously trust and mistrust their own experience. While they value what they know, they are also very aware that their experience could mean nothing if the conditions change suddenly and unpredictably. Confidence with humility is how it counts out. This again is about being willing to shed and replace. Last one, if you want a school that sheds, I believe it needs to be simple, sensible, and safe. A school where people shed and renew, where new learning is both accepted and expected, calls for an environment which is simple, sensible, safe. Leaders nurture opportunities for renewal by keeping things simple, not stupid. I don't know, lots of schools I go to in my part of the world at least are getting overcomplicated. Simple can still be sophisticated. Simple doesn't mean stupid, but it means leaders work to keep out unnecessary change, bureaucratic clutter, and overcomplicated structures and processes, giving people therefore more headspace to be able to learn. Leaders value sensible decisions and action. And a sensible decision is something that aligns with the purpose and moral platform, and it actually benefits the kids. I believe one of the greatest compliments that a leader can give someone when they give them an idea is say, yeah, that's sensible. And of course, renewal won't happen unless people are physically, culturally, and psychologically safe. And as leaders, we are immovable on that. It's the right and the entitlement of every child, of every teacher, of every person living and working in our school. You won't renew if you're scared. So in summary, I've tried to say that the key challenge of 5.0 is to be able to constantly renew ourselves as leaders, emotionally, psychologically, pedagogically. And our role then further as leaders is to put that in the school. We know what a leader models in the school is most often what happens. Not what they say, but what they model. So if a leader models renewal and learning, the teachers will model learning and renewal, and then hopefully that will spread on down into the classrooms. So snakes might be creepy, but they might have some good lessons for us after all. Thank you very much.